Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
وعلى الصعيد الميداني قتل 5 أطفال عراقيين على
In Iraq, 5 children were killed at their deaths by an attack that targeted their school in Baghdad. The armed assailants that targeted the school exploded 2 cars in the district of Diyala, killing 7 Iraqis and injuring many others. Meanwhile, a funeral was held for Mohammed Haroun, the Secretary General of the United Iraqi Journalists.
هنا كانت مجموعة من تلاميذ المرحلة الابتدائية.
This is where elementary students sat to study when they escaped the room when a mortar shell landed on their school in the Mansour neighborhood, west of Baghdad, killing 5 children and injuring others. Some were severely wounded.
بعضهم في حال الخطر.
Blood, dirt, and scattered bodies.
العراق شهد أحداثا مسلحة أخرى أسفرت في محافظة ديالا.
Iraq witnessed other armed attacks in the district of Diyala, killing 7 Iraqis and injuring 22 others when 2 booby-trap cars exploded. The first car targeted an Iraqi army checkpoint in the district of Khalas, killing 3 and injuring others. The second car exploded near the provincial building in the city of Ba'quba, killing 4 Iraqis and burning a number of cars and military vehicles belonging to the American occupation army. 6 other Iraqis were killed by a mortar shell that landed near the Sadiq Mosque in Samara, north of Baghdad. In Fallujah, a general strike was held, which halted all activities there, protesting the American occupation forces' arrest of a young 20-year-old woman, Sara Taha Khalaf, under the pretext that she is cooperating with the armed assailants.
We are striking in solidarity with our sister from the city of Fallujah, who the American forces arrested for the second time. Her father and brother were also arrested.
في غضون ذلك شيع العراقيون جثمان محمد هارون أمين سر اتحاد الصحفيين.
Meanwhile, Iraqis held a funeral procession for Mahmoud Haroun, the Secretary General of the United Iraqi Journalists. He was killed by unknown armed assailants who attacked his car on the Muhammad al-Qasim highway in the center of Baghdad. Near Kirkuk, a fire broke out on one of the oil pipelines, which was attacked by a mortar shell. The fire spread quickly throughout the surrounding areas, forcing nearby residents to evacuate their homes due to the intense black smoke which covered the sky in the area.
The United States military said today 5 U.S. soldiers have been killed in 2 attacks in Iraq and 6 died from a known hostile gunshot wound. In Ba'quba, police said 4 civilians were killed and 14 wounded when a car driven by a suicide bomber in a car blew himself up. Meanwhile, angry Iraqi reporters held an impromptu memorial for the secretary of the Iraqi Journalists Union on Thursday, a day after he was killed by unknown gunmen in the latest attacks on the country's Belgariad media. Elsewhere, 4 civilians were killed and 18 seriously wounded yesterday when the mortar rounds landed on the city of Samaras, 170 kilometers north of Baghdad. In another incident, a child and 2 guards were killed and 4 children wounded when a mortar round landed on a school in the southern Mansour district of the capital. Arab League Secretary General Amr Moussa, who has warned Iraq was on the verge of civil war, arrived in Baghdad today for what officials have said will be a mission to promote national reconciliation. Moussa was to be in Baghdad for 3 days at the head of a 34-member Arab League delegation. He was expected to make final preparations for a reconciliation conference at the League's Cairo headquarters once results of Saturday's constitutional referendum in Iraq were released. Moussa also planned to meet with Iraq's clerics cleric Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani, as well as government and tribal leaders. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas hopes President George W. Bush will also step up pressure on Israel when he demands at their summit today that the Palestinian Authority do more to rein in militants. The meeting is the first between Bush and Abbas since Israel evacuated the Gaza Strip last month after 38 years of occupation. At the top of the list of Abbas wishes is pressure on Israel to halt settlements expansion in the West Bank and constructions of the barrier there that Israel says keeps out suicide bombers and Palestinians call a land grab. Abbas also wants to end an argument over border crossings that has left Gaza largely sealed up since the Israelis withdrew. He wants Israel to agree to opening Gaza Sea and airports and to allow a free land route to the West Bank. Israel contemplated slapping a permanent ban on Palestinians using major highways in the West Bank in a bid to improve security for settlers living in the occupied territory. Security sources said members of the Army's Central Command met to discuss the plan, which was denounced by the Palestinian Authority as tantamount to a form of apartheid. The separation plan would force Palestinians instead to use back roads to travel across the territory, few of which are in a good state of repair. In contrast, the highways around the West Bank settlements are well maintained. Chief Palestinian negotiator Saeb Erekat said that the plan had ominous echoes of the apartheid regime in South Africa. United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan made an urgent appeal today to the international community for more funds to aid Pakistan. Mr. Annan started by paying tribute to the courage and determination of the people and government of Pakistan, whose losses following the earthquake of 8th October were greater than they can fathom.
The death toll in Pakistan is not yet over. An estimated 3 million men, women and children are homeless. Many of them have no blankets or tents to protect them against the merciless Himalayan winter. And that means a second wave of massive death will happen if we do not step up our efforts. And not do it, we have to wait.
That was United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan. United States Defense Secretary Donald H. Rumsfeld said today that the United States wants China to be more open about its nuclear capability. In a speech to the Academy of Military Sciences in Beijing, Rumsfeld noted that China was expanding its missiles forces. Rumsfeld said many countries with an interest in the Asian-Pacific region were questioning China's military intentions. The commander of the China's nuclear missiles forces reaffirmed to Rumsfeld yesterday that in an armed conflict, China would not be the first to use nuclear weapons. Later today, Rumsfeld is flying to Seoul, South Korea, on the second leg of a 5-state tour. Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra said today Thailand suffered its first death from bird flu in a year, but reassured the nation that safety controls were in place amid heightening global fears over the virus. The death of the 48-year-old farmer was the country's 13th fatality from the virus, but the Prime Minister of Thailand said his government was fully able to contain the disease and urged the people to stay calm. The deadly H5N1 strain of the virus has already killed more than 60 people in Asia since 2003 and is now spreading to Europe and Russia, fueling fears of a global influenza pandemic. In London, health ministers from the 25-nation European Union gathered today for a 2-day meeting dominated by the fear of a bird flu sweeping through the continent. Back here in the Sultanate of Oman, the Economy Culture Seminar was conducted at Saham Sports Club under the auspices of His Excellency Ahmed bin Sulaiman Al-Maimani and the Secretary for Administrative and Financial Affairs at the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. The seminar, organized by the club in cooperation with the Oman Chamber of Commerce and Industry branch in Sohar, comprised presentation of 3 work papers. The seminar aims at educating the community as regards the economy, culture and architectural aspects being witnessed by Al-Batina region.
In the Palestinian territories, the Israeli plan to separate between the Palestinians and the Israeli settlements in the West Bank unnerves the Palestinians, who believe that the plan will take them back to square one. This comes as a Palestinian was martyred by Israeli gunshots in the village of Hosan near Bethlehem.
With calm and without media coverage, the Israeli army began its plan to implement new separation projects inside the West Bank, which will prevent Palestinians from using the main streets that link their cities together, making them exclusive to the settlers and the Israeli army. Strict measures were taken in villages and cities, and there are increased checkpoints preventing the Palestinians from using their own streets and forcing them to use the rocky and mountain roads. The plans have been publicized under the pretext of security, but the Palestinians confirmed that the plans were prepared in advance to guarantee greater Israeli control over the West Bank. The Palestinian Prime Minister, Ahmed Qureh, described the Israeli plan as another form of what he called apartheid.
We warn against the continued separation, which is represented specifically by the wall and the expansion of settlements. There are news reports which say that this is part of a plan to annex these areas and build separate roads for Israeli settlers. Today, the Israeli government has denied this, and we hope that this is true. In the plan, some areas and streets were left for the Palestinians. We reject this completely. All the streets in the 1967 occupied West Bank are for the Palestinians. So we call on Israel, the Israeli peace movement, and the international community to hurry towards resuming negotiations.
وندعو حركة السلام الإسرائيلية وندعو المجتمع الدولي فعلا أن يعجل في عملية بدء المفاوضات.
The Israeli measures aim at gradually and completely dividing the Palestinians and the Israelis under the pretext of the threat of terrorist attacks. Strict Israeli measures continue to be imposed on the Palestinian streets, despite the Palestinian Authority appealing to the international community to immediately intervene and stop these measures. Faiz Abu Awad, Jordanian Television, the Palestinian Presidential Headquarters.
Huge Palestinian crowds, including families of prisoners and representatives from different national and Islamic forces, held demonstrations outside the Red Cross headquarters in Gaza. The Prisoners Committee, which belongs to national and Islamic forces, has deliberately held demonstrations outside the Red Cross at the same time as Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas meets with American President George Bush in Washington to request them to exert pressure on the Israeli government to release all prisoners without any conditions. Our young men are in prisons. There is no peace while our young men are in prison. Eid is approaching and my son will not be with me. Isn't this unjust?
The Eid has returned once again, and nothing has changed, with tears and words filled with sadness and pain, and mothers' hearts burn, missing, holding their sons in their arms. Prisoners' mothers expressed how much they missed their sons who are behind the bars of the Israeli prisons. This came during the demonstration held by the Prisoners' Committee that belongs to national and Islamic forces in front of the Red Cross building in Gaza, at the same time as the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas meets with American President George Bush. A number of officials and many prisoners' families participated. Speakers urged the international community to pressure Israel to stop its practices against the prisoners.
Let the Palestinian president remind the American president about his promises that the Palestinians have the right to a state and to live there in peace and security.
Prisoners' families participated in this demonstration, standing holding their sons' portraits, demanding the world to pressure Israel to release our prisoners and to abide by the international law concerning detainees and political prisoners.
My brother's wife has only been allowed to visit her husband twice since his detention. He was a groom when the Israelis took him. When his wife was finally allowed to visit him, he did not know her. I swear he did not know his own wife when she went to visit him for the first time. Then they said we were allowed to visit only every 45 days, but we haven't been able to visit him for 4 months. When his daughter visited him, he held her and broke into tears. I was so affected by this that I had to go to the hospital the second day. Until when do our sons have to stay in prison? Until they die or until we die and we can no longer see them? I cried my eyes out over him. I'm always heartbroken when I think about him. I'm heartbroken when I get up and when I sit down. When I see his pictures, I'm heartbroken. I keep asking myself, when can I see him and hold him like I do with his brothers? His sisters and brothers miss him. Neither his sisters nor his brothers are allowed to visit. Nobody is allowed to visit except for me and his father.
We are the exiles from the Nativity Church and demand the release of all the prisoners. We demand President Bush and the international community pressure Israel to release all prisoners and detainees.
The Prisoners Committee that belongs to the National Islamic Forces confirmed that releasing the prisoners is what international treaties call for. From outside the Red Cross headquarters in Gaza, Fawza Al-Halu, Palestine Television.
The Guardian Daily in its Thursday report says Abbas bombings have rekindled anti-British sentiments in Iran. The Daily quotes families of the blast victims as saying London is behind a series of bombings in the southwestern city and refers to the record of the old colonizer and its interventionist policies in Iran. In its report, The Guardian also refers to the British government's fear of Iran's possible trade embargo on Britain as punishment for London's stance over Tehran's nuclear program. According to Daily, British Foreign Office is investigating any possible retaliatory move by Iran. The anti-British trade ban has been accompanied by other ad hoc embargoes against South Korea, Czech Republic, and Argentina. All three countries voted for a British-led resolution at last month's meeting of the International Atomic Energy Agency. This is while South Korean foreign ministers to pay a visit to Tehran next week to discuss trade relations with Tehran, soured after Seoul's vote at the IAEA. Meanwhile, President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad says political ties should be balanced with economic ones when it comes to bilateral relations between two countries. The Iranian president further said Iran surely will use its economic and political power to support national interests. U.S. Undersecretary of State Nicholas Burns says Iran should return to the negotiation table with the European Union. This is more on what he told IRIB correspondent in New York.
It should be a diplomatic solution. Iran should end its conversion of uranium at Isfahan. Iran should return to the negotiations with Europe that it broke off in August. And Iran should agree on a peaceful, negotiated way to resolve this problem. But we don't think there should be Iranian access to the nuclear fuel cycle. And we think Iran needs to comply with the wishes of the international community, which are quite strong in this issue,
Iran's Foreign Ministry spokesman Hamidreza Safi says direct talks with Washington is not on Tehran's agenda. Safi also added on Thursday Tehran is skeptical over Washington's attitudes and intentions. Safi went on to say U.S. overture for holding talks with Iran is not compatible with its hostile stance against the country, saying Washington should revise its attitude and behavior toward Iran. All this comes in reaction to comments by U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, who said on Wednesday Washington is considering direct talks with Tehran in a multilateral framework over Iraq.
Mr. Mansour al-Ahwazi, Britain has accused the Iranian Revolutionary Guards of smuggling cluster bombs made by Hezbollah that were used in killing 8 British soldiers. Is this the straw that broke the camel's back, as they say, or are there any other factors?
Of course, the primary factor behind the deteriorating relations between Iran and Britain is the contradiction in Tehran's foreign policy during the past 2 decades and the absence of a clear foreign policy. In addition, many parties are making political decisions. This kind of behavior caused Iran's foreign policy to be the stage of conflicts among different Iranian groups and wings. Therefore, Iran is struggling with many powerful contradictions, making it unable to resolve any international crises in a reasonable manner.
أن هناك دائما إيران تعاني من تناقضات شديدة تجعلها غير قادرة عن حل أي أزمة من أزماتها الخارجية بطريقة عقلانية.
هل هناك يعني صدفة أن
Is it a coincidence that many military and political officials have commented on Iran at the same time? British Foreign Secretary Jack Straw and Prime Minister Tony Blair are making similar comments regarding Iran, which were also made after Saudi Arabia's Foreign Minister Saud Faisal talked about Iran's involvement in Iraq, in addition to George Bush's similar comments. Is this a coincidence?
No, this is not a coincidence. Why? Because it is not possible to separate international politics from domestic politics, and Iran's domestic policy has completely changed now after the Revolutionary Guards managed to take over the highest decision-making positions in Iran, especially after the presidency of Ahmadinejad. This of course reflected upon Iran's foreign policy. We can see that Iran became stricter regarding its nuclear file and more committed in its attempts to maintain its nuclear program.
As was pointed out by Professor Atallah Saeed, Foreign Secretary Jack Straw ruled out any military option to resolve Iran's nuclear ambition. When Iran's president went to the United Nations, he said that public and private companies should come and participate in the uranium enrichment programs. This way, the world can absorb the level of enrichment, which are not nearly enough to even produce a nuclear bomb. How firm is this position?
أولاً إيران في صناع القرار في إيران في إطار نظريتهم
The decision makers in Iran have the perspective that they are operating under the framework of unequal war. So they are trying to attain nuclear technology to reach a type of balance with an enemy who is superior to them politically, technologically, militarily, and on all levels. From this perspective, they seek to attain nuclear technology so they can guarantee their survival and, as they claim, to maintain the unity of Iranian territories and protect the present regime. Therefore, the Iranian government is becoming more persistent in this pursuit. There is also the issue of transparency, the lack of transparency of Iran's dealings with the International Nuclear Energy Agency on the one hand and with the European Union, especially the Troika, on the other. This highlighted and increased the world's suspicions and concerns regarding Iran's pursuit of a nuclear program.
Muslim and Christian clerics attended an interfaith event at the Coptic Patriarch's headquarters in Al-Manqasiyya Cathedral in Al-Abbasiyya. Among the attendees was Dr. Ahmed Nadif, the Egyptian Deputy Prime Minister, the Grand Mufti and Imam of Al-Azhar Mosque, Dr. Muhammad Sayyid al-Tantawi, and Mr. Jamal Mubarak, the chair of the political committee of the National Democratic Party, and a number of government officials. His Holiness the Coptic Pope, Shenouda III, arranged for this event, which was attended by several senior government officials.
Under the theme of National Unity Ramadan Iftar, the Al-Manqasiyya Cathedral in Al-Abbasiyya held its annual Ramadan Iftar celebration to extend love and harmony between different Egyptian ethnic and religious groups, and to also strengthen the relation between Muslims and Christian Copts in Egypt. A large number of Muslim and Christian religious leaders attended the event. Among the guests were the Grand Mufti and Imam of Al-Azhar Mosque, Dr. Muhammad Sayyid Tantawi, His Holiness Pope Shenouda, and a number of ministers and government officials.
We thank God. Praise be to Him who made this meeting possible. Muslims and Christians are sitting and eating together on one dining table. They are sitting next to each other at the table of national unity. They are sincere, honest, and bound together for the sake of Egypt. I pray to God, praise be to Him, to bless Egypt with peace, security, hope, and happiness under the rule of His Excellency President Mohammed Hosni Mubarak. God spare him. I also pray that God will direct Egyptians on the right path. I would like to say to everyone, Happy Ramadan and Happy Feast.
This iftar celebration has been going on for 19 or 20 years, and our relationship has increasingly grown. This holy gesture is also spreading into other parts of Egypt and abroad.
This interfaith event is considered to be a symbol of unity among Egyptians, especially during their different religious ceremonies and holidays.
This is an occasion where we reflect on the Egyptian society fiber, which connect people together. And there's nothing better than a religious occasion to bring both sides together.
Hadila Fikri, the Nile News Channel.
The village of the Ma'asurin in the Idlib province has decided to create opportunities for work rather than looking abroad for it. It has created several industrial projects which employ its residents and some surrounding villages. This is not a scene at one of the factories in one of our largest cities. It is in a large village in the district of Idlib with a population of just 6,000. The village has witnessed an industrial and commercial renaissance in the past 2 decades, offering employment opportunities to the residents of the village and the surrounding area.
Considering that there is little farmland, young men have turned towards manufacturing. We are famous for the manufacturing of plastics, electrical wires, and sponges. Thank God the young are working and we have good and active employment here.
The village of the Ma'asurin no longer has a problem with unemployment. Most people here have work, and even the old houses have been transformed into training centers and factories. This reality reflects on individual lives here. Modern homes were built, the number of students in schools increased, and the number of people with college and postgraduate degrees increased. The signs of good living have started appearing in the village.
When electricity was introduced to this beautiful village in 1978, manufacturing began to spring up here. The most important production is cutting and selling of all kinds of man-made sponges. Also, there is the production of rugs and plastic carpets. Most of the people in this village work in this type of trade and manufacturing. Yes, most of the employees from the village work in plastic rug making and work in this factory.
They used funds from agricultural profits to establish these factories that generate constant revenue. Their numbers have reached more than 100. The increased production helped in creating new opportunities in many Syrian districts. Syrians are no longer thinking about leaving Syria for job opportunities, and not too many of those who have degrees are expecting to work for the government. Ahmed Zarway, Syrian Arab Television.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities. and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.